Welcome, everyone, to Mythstorie, a podcast about myths and history. I am one of your hosts, Bryant, with my permanent guest, Cammy. Hey there, Cammy.
Hi, Bryant.
How you doing?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I am well. Also, we've just been really kicking off January great. I'm really happy how this new year's been going, podcast-wise, at least, so far. If you just started joining us, Mythstorie, we like to pick legends and tales and stories. We've had a really good variety recently too, but classic stuff, Roman, Greek, but crazy stuff like ninjas, like we just recently did. And today we have a cool one. This was a offhanded one. I think this is one you thought of too, right? Or I don't know.
It sounds like something I would think of.
Yeah.
But I think it was you, honestly.
Oh, that's right. No, I think it was the Reddit Mythology subreddit. That's what it was. Yeah. So we're going to talk about sort of, and it's not as simple as I thought it was initially, but sort of the black dog of England myth. This is I thought it was a one-handed thing, and you're probably going, oh, like Harry Potter. Yes, like Harry Potter. You are right.
Exactly.
We'll talk about that for sure. But this is like way bigger than I thought, but I think we've got a good way to talk about it. So Cammy is going to hit us with a story, and then we'll have a nice little discussion about it afterwards. Cammy, are you ready?
I am.
Take us away.
So I used quode.lib.umich.edu, the report of a strange and wonderful spectacle. And this supposedly is a real report that I read to do the story. So
very nice.
Kind of interesting. From 1577. In the year of our Lord, 1577, on the day of the 4th of August, a terrible storm erupted. We were safe in church this morning, but the thunder rocked even the stone walls. The rain sounded more like huge rocks hitting the top of our sanctuary. The lightning flashed through the sky and served to illuminate the otherwise dimness. The wind gusts were so strong the door of the church sprang open and the candles flickered. As we rushed to close the huge church doors, a black dog rushed us and ran about the church. He was the largest animal of his kind any of us had seen, much larger than a wolf. If he stood upon his hind legs, which he did when he reached his first victim, he was nearly 7 feet tall. And the man he came down upon was kneeled in prayer. The animal swiftly bit the back of his neck and broke it, and then he moved to the boy beside him and did the same. He did not act like a rabid animal, but more like a deliberate and devilish beast. Some whispered he was possessed by Satan, so that he might enter hallowed ground and do his evil work. Some even said it was the work of God himself to keep us on the path of righteousness, and to duly fear him as our Creator and our Father in heaven. The supernatural beast, whether he came from the depths of hell or the gates of heaven, his wrath was the same. He burnt a man upon his back with his paws. Our rector stood, his hands and head folded in prayer, and urged us to join him, praising our Lord for what mysteries were happening around us. The dog was still rampaging through the church. He smashed holy objects and burned the clock and smashed it with the power of his paws. All the candles and lanterns in the church extinguished themselves as if on cue. So the only light was from the demon hound's eyes and the breaks of lightning outside. We were otherwise in complete darkness, still praying in hopes that God would spare us. When the animal was behind us, we could not perceive him at all, for his footfalls made no sound, as large as he was. But then he would smash other objects or jump upon a pew, and we would know where to look. He finally, after all of his terror, leapt to the balcony and climbed upon it, snarling at the parishioners there. And then, as violently as he came in, he left, jumping through the highest window, the stained glass raining upon us, and he was gone into the darkness. The storm soon lifted, and we set about the task of cleaning up the church. But the reports from that day from other churches told us of a large, fearsome dog who wreaked hell upon them as they prayed. All of those who witnessed this day knew to fear God and his awesomeness.
To fear God, not the giant dog? All right. Well,
yep.
Dog backwards.
Yeah, they thought it was from God. And, God was like, hey, here's a big dog.
Yeah.
Fear me.
That's the dog spelled backwards, argument.
Oh, well, there you go. I didn't even think of that.
Myths busted. We're done. See y'all next week. Now, That's really cool. Yeah, this I went into this thinking it was going to be like one black dog in England myth, like there's one dog and that's it. No, like it's like a county thing. Like every like square mile has its own dog myth and name for it. It's kind of wild.
There was even an earlier account that I came across, but
Oh, wow.
it wasn't much of a story, but it was like a news report
Mm.
from the 12th century. It was like 1127, I think. And these hunters came on, they were dressed in all black and they rode black horses, and they had these black dogs that were like demon dogs with them, bringing terror upon the land, basically.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And we've dogs in mythology aren't new. Cerberus is probably one of the most famous and one of the oldest that we have. And it's just interesting though. This does, while my sources, Ancient Origins had a great write-up, Wikipedia, of course, and a few others I'll mention. They a lot of these specifically talk about England, but all over the world they have some stories, and there's a few themes around, a few similarities that they're going to share, but it seems to be really a Celtic and Germanic based thing. That's what we're kind of talking about. So I mean, it kind of goes from Germany to Norway to England and the rest of Europe. It's that area through time is where it seemed to have formed. And if you've listened to a lot of the shows, or if these religions, the Celtic, the Gaelic, the Germanic peoples, the Norse, they didn't write stuff down until they were Christianized. And like the same way we kind of have like Greek texts and things like that. So we don't have like a really distinctive idea of when this really formed, and it probably formed a long time ago. And the thing that kind of shows up is that they are usually a sign of death associated with the devil, and in many cases can shapeshift. Those are sort of the main things. And Wikipedia describes this as a motif, a distinctive feature. I just Googled the definition just for the sake of it. A distinctive feature or dominant idea in an artistic or literary composition. And that it does. It comes up several times, and it certainly lives on today. Thanks to things like Harry Potter, it kind of renewed it as well. And I felt really good about this. So I was reading, and my note said dogs associated with death in European myth, and I put in parentheses scavengers, and literally the next line was like, this is probably because they scavenged fields. And it was there's a book, Infernal Watchdogs, Soul Hunters and Corpse Eaters, by Albie Stone, in 2005. This came out, and it mentions that, and that's it.
That's like the Egyptian, the jackal god.
Absolutely, yeah. And I read, I mentioned Bernard Cornwell all the time with the Last Kingdom series and the Sharp series and stuff, and he'll mention, like, his very in-depth thing, he'll always mention a few things. He'll mention how the crows come to a battlefield after a battle, and they go for your eyes first if they can. That's what the crows want. But the dogs will go for your belly, and they'll start going in there. So, and you think how wonderful the conditions were throughout the 8th and 15th centuries, medieval and feudal England and Europe, and how everyone's dying, and the dog is he's going to go for it no matter what. So yeah, it totally makes sense that these guys would be associated with that. The wild thing is how they're also really associated with churches, like your story mentioned, and they can be seen haunting churches. And I won't go into it too much, but there are benevolent stories of protectors guiding people, specifically black dogs, protecting or guiding and things like that. But of course, it vastly goes the other way. We have some. I mentioned Cerberus, the ancient myth of Cerberus. There's also Garmr of Norse, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Cammy, this will sound familiar to you though. Cún Anún,
Yes,
is a Welsh, and the Cún Anún, meaning like other world, or in a sense like the afterlife. The Cún Anún, they're kind of like harbingers of the afterlife, and they're also kind of, I don't know if they're related to, but there's also Cúsith, if I'm pronouncing that right. That's Scottish Gaelic. This is a hound, which is a harbinger of death. The name means fairy dog in Gaelic, and they have their own kind of big mythology as well. But so there are these really strong local myths in the areas, specifically in the British Isles and England. And it does seem like starting so I got this from ancient EU. I'll kind of quote here a little bit. The origin's hard to establish. Mark Norman, who's been researching the legend of black dogs in England for many years, has traced the earliest accounts in English literature dating back to 1127. According to Norman's studies, not Norman studies, black dogs can take different forms, but a few common traits are present in all descriptions. They are large, shaggy coats, and big, glowing eyes that are usually red. So like what you were saying, time-wise, so 1127 it seems literature-wise, or it seems to kind of be down. So who knows how long it preceded the literature? I mean, if it's in Gaelic and Welsh mythology and Norse, obviously this goes back, like ancient. This could be like a really
because
concept.
There's this in Scandinavia, right?
Yes. Okay. Yes. Yeah. And if we're thinking about the indigenous Welsh peoples, that's we're talking Roman times, like timeline wise, the classical period, antiquity. So these stories, while we don't have the evidence of it, it easily word of mouth wise and culturally could be timeless in a human history sense. So it just is wild, though. Kind of fast forward to today, there are now tons and tons of versions, like too many. I truly cannot name them all. The one I kind of we'll talk about a little bit more is one of the more famous ones, Black Shuck of East Anglia. And so the Black Shuck, the name is believed to have derived from the Old English word skuka, which means fiend or devil, but also it sounded like succubus to me. And if it's Old English, it could have been mixed with Latin, flirted a little bit, and maybe came out as skuka. So, but the word skuka, it goes off of the verb ska, to terrify. Again, could be related to succubus. That's just Bryant's analysis. So these guys, there's Abraham Fleming is a historian. He an account of the appearance of a strange and terrible wonder in 1577 at Bungay, Suffolk, is a famous account of the beast. Black dogs, red eyes, usually around church, like huge dogs, wolf-sized, and they were. I always cited at churches was the big thing. What's cool too, I didn't look this up, but there's a crowd-funded graphic novel called The Burning Black: Legend of Black Shuck, published in 2019, and it's the Black Shuck as the central antagonist. So these things are huge, and there's there was a whole section on Wikipedia. So many British bands like The Darkness had either like songs or like called something like the Black Shuck.
Yeah, I noticed whenever I was looking up like Black Dog, and then they had a bunch of different words, and I would like Google, and it's like, wait a second.
Right. Yeah, you can't.
This is really ingrained in your culture.
Right. Exactly. And that's a big part of it. It's totally like infused, and there's just sort of localizations going worldwide. Very briefly, there's a couple in America probably that connected to the colonization. In Asia, there's a handful. One notable thing that we've talked about is apparently the Arabic jinn, which is kind of sort of like a demon. It's where we get the word genie from. Apparently, black dogs were mounts for them. They rode black dogs. So going with the malevolence of it, that's sort of what they did. And Tizzo, you can go on Wikipedia, you can look up the black dog concept, and one thing you're going to see is you're going to see every little area has its own thing. And today, what really kind of helped, I think, circulate those myths is things like the Sherlock Holmes tale, The Hound of the Baskervilles, which is Sherlock Holmes is brought in to discover if this is like a mythical black dog that's terrorizing or what, and he does his thing. Another big thing, as we mentioned, was Harry Potter. Sirius Black, he can take the form of a black dog, and in the third book or movie, Harry sees the omen in the teacups. And it's a black dog, a sign of death. So it's totally playing directly on the English, the modern, idea of what a black dog, the symbol, means. And funny enough, so do you remember Sirius Black's his like pen name or his like animal name? Do you remember what his nickname was? Padfoot. Padfoot is another name in some areas used for the black dog phenomena, the myth. So that was Rowling is directly kind of taking local myth, local English myth, when she was creating that character. So that was really interesting. But yeah, it's a insanely deep subject. I was really surprised to see and thrown off guard. It's totally makes sense that these are older stories, and it was interesting seeing the theme of dogs, likely due to their fact of being like scavengers of eating dead people's organs. They weren't always seen kind of fashionably and with welcoming, but it was it made the church thing was really kind of what interested me. That's really where all the stories sort of went to, and that's what really surprised me is their interest in the church. And I it's the Christian thing. The black dog represents the devil. That's the place, the burial of the dead. Dogs like bones. Those are the things that I can kind of think of. Oh, and in Wales as well, there's the Cunanun or Quinanun, but there's also Gwithgi, I think, Gwithgi, which is a dog of darkness, which is like another sort of frightful apparition with red eyes. So these, which are related to the Quinanun or Cunanun. All again, that specifically has to do with death, but it's also a bad omen thing. The Gwithgi are specifically like malevolent, though. So it's just wild. Lots of similarities, but again, England, that the British Islands, they had enough diversity and enough population to really make these myths local. So that's the really cool thing. So if I'm a dummy. I have an English mom. I should have messaged her. I will. I'll follow up. I'll write a post on Facebook. What her what was her household black dog, because I feel like that's how it is. It's like banshees, like you have your house banshee. Like what evil hound is haunting you? Tell us about him. So I'll see if she's got anything on that. But it's super local and super specific to many regions of England, but with very similar encompassing features. So yeah, thank you, Cammy, for that great story.
I do want to say I did find something really interesting in my research, and this is ancient-code.com.
Oh yeah.
And the other article was from the Daily Mail, so I took this one. But basically, there was a skeleton found, supposedly, and it was very near this Holy Trinity Church in Blythenburg, which is the one that Bryant mentioned and the one that the story's based on. But the skeleton was found. I mean, obviously, they don't know. I don't guess they know what color the dog was because it was just bones. But they said that if it stood on its hind legs, it would be over 7 feet tall.
Yeah.
And it would have been over 200 pounds. So my gosh, like
that makes me think of I think
that's bigger than a wolf. Like that's
right. Yeah. And we underestimate wolves.
Dane or Mastiff size, basically.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. They're like wolves are like, I always underestimate a wolf. And then once you see how big a wolf actually is, you're like, oh, and so, yeah, it could be, a wolf size or slightly bigger dog. So
yeah, it would be like
terrifying.
Even dire wolves, I don't think would get to 200 pounds. I mean, they're huge. They're maybe like 180 or something.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I mean, that would be a big Great Dane,
Yeah.
I have friends with Great Danes and they're like 150.
Yeah.
But
well, no, that's great. Yeah. If you have anything to share regarding this, we'd love to hear it. Again, it is super local, so I'm sure there's some interesting stuff out there, but we hope you enjoyed this story. If you have any suggestions or any feedback, let us know. Mythstorie@gmail.com is a great way to get in touch. You can also hit us up on Facebook. That's our most active community right now, really. And we're also on Reddit, Twitter, Instagram, threadless.mystery.com, mystery.threadless.com. Yeah, I think that about covers it, Cammy. Thanks again for everything.
I just had to put that ticker up.
No, boom. Yeah. And please, I didn't mention it. We're on YouTube where you can watch us, you can listen to us, like us, subscribe us if you can. Of course, that always helps, but we're always here to please. So enjoy. We'll see y'all next time. Oh, it makes sense this time.
Is that a hound baying in the moors?